So last time we talked, we left off talking about the two different versions coming out of the Enlightenment, the moderate Enlightenment and the radical Enlightenment. And the radical Enlightenment philosophers believed in open democracy, and the moderates kind of feared democracy because they feared mob rule and they feared that uneducated masses would have a voice, and they didn't like that. They were more in favor of the aristocratic model. So I want to focus in, which I think is the biggest societal challenge or hurdle that underlines all of this, which is public education and the importance of a knowledgeable citizenry. If you look at Eisenhower's farewell address, I know he was talking about the military industrial complex, but he said the best anecdote is an alert and knowledgeable citizenry, which I think is very important, not just about the military industrial complex, but about everything. So, what is the importance of an educated citizenry in democracy?
It's fundamental. It's a great point that you bring up, and in fact, the radicals, especially, or the kind of the democratic enlighteners, they believe that common people, even though so many were uneducated in their day, could be educated in civic affairs in a way that would allow citizens to pick representatives, to argue for their interests, to promote their interests. So the Democratic Republican types, Jefferson and Franklin and Thomas Paine, they very much understood the importance of what today would be called the civic education. I think the moderates weren't against education by any means, but since their model was more where educated leaders, aristocrats, what we call elite today, that they would be governing on behalf of the people, I think they were not as vociferously for broad-based education. Now, this is actually reflected in the work that many of the enlighteners did. For example, during the French Enlightenment and during the first part of the French Revolution, Condorcet, who was a very influential philosopher and what I would call part of the radical Enlightenment, he articulated an entire slate of educational material that the state should provide. Now, in Europe, he was reacting to the fact that he had documented that for many centuries, the church, which really controlled education, and the monarchy colluded to keep the people oppressed. So he was trying to break education away from the purview of only the church. He wasn't against church teaching, but he wanted to make sure it was rounded out with enlightenment-based teaching. And so so he really established, Condorcet did, that the foundational requirements for what a civic education might include. And I think in the U.S. we had a similar angle, if you will. Someone like Benjamin Franklin, one of the great enlighteners on the radical side. I mean, his whole life was about distributing information, the printing press, Paul Richard's Almanac. He was very enthused about the notion of educating the common person. So there are definitely educational aspects of the Enlightenment that are so important.
Yeah, and fast forwarding to today, how do we strive for a better and objective education in a world with increasing ideological driven mainstream narratives? There's a lot of misinformation on social media because social media is such a huge aspect of today's, life, that a lot of people get the vast amount of their information from social media, which can be riddled with all kinds of false narratives. So how do we navigate that sort of public and civic education in today's world?
Well, you bring up a great example with social media. The idea that so many people today, and especially young people, read something or see something on social media and believe it to be true is exactly the problem itself. In critical thinking, in what when we talk about civic education, that I think we've taken our foot off the gas pedal. We've really been lax in recent generations. The whole concept is to be able to evaluate sources for veracity and to check different sources to really understand and pursue the truth and then make an argument, a logical argument based on sources. So that is a fundamental part of critical thinking, which is a vital part of civic education. You know, Jacob, when you're much younger than I, but when I was in school, even in high school, we used to have debate clubs where the whole concept was to take to really do research and create an argument for a point of view and then debate it. And maybe the next week you actually were assigned to do the opposite point of view and you had to come up with different arguments. So the whole notion of critical thinking is so crucial. And I think today we've lost the importance of that. And too many people rely on social media without checking sources and making sure that the information that they consume is from various sources, is diverse, and also is from quality sources. So that's a very important piece.
Yeah, I love that exercise. Personally, I love doing that. I love putting myself in the shoes of a viewpoint that I disagree with and trying to completely understand it and be able to articulate it from that point of view. Even though I disagree with it, I think it's a fun intellectual exercise and it leads to a more, educated, cohesive conversation around various political issues.